Hello, and welcome to another completely unprofessional unboxing. Scott here, also known as Hail Orchistorchis on Twitter, or generally Orchistorchis, or whatever you want to call me. I'm not going to be offended. Uh, Anyhow, so I'm back after some time away to do another unboxing. Unfortunately, Taylor nor Noah will be here with me this time. Not because they didn't want to. They're both busy. You might hear my daughter playing with her friends outside, and my son, who is on summer break, is doing the typical teenager thing and avoiding all responsibilities and his own parents. But, anyways, this is more of a personal thing, kind of a bit of nostalgia with these with these unboxings, because found a couple things that I was looking at and found them for a very good deal and decided to pick them up. What they pertain to is everyone who has ever played D&D is always asked the question, which one was your introduction? And everyone has one, whether it be the original white box, blue box, red box, AD&D second edition, and on down the road to fifth. But for me, it was always something a little different. It was, even though my introduction to D&D was, the blue box, so to speak, there was something that preceded that was my true introduction to Dungeons and Dragons, and that's what's going to be inside this and other packages. So I'm going to pick up my trusty Coleman steak knife, camping steak knife, because it still functions. And I'm going to do a completely unprofessional unboxing. So, and that doesn't work. And there we go. And don't worry, if I cut myself, it will be still unedited for all to enjoy. And what do we have here? And thank you for putting it in a Ziploc baggie, because we have been having a lot of hot and humid weather throughout most of the United States, and humidity is no fun getting into packages. So, what do we have here? Well, I'm sure many of you are familiar with these books. For those of you who are not, these are Dungeons and Dragons Endless Quest books, Pick a Path to Adventure. What these were very similar to a Choose Your Own Adventure book, but specifically designed for Dungeons and Dragons. I am no academic when it comes to these, but looking at the covers, these are probably one of the first printings, just because I know they shrunk them down in other printings where there was a different logo up here. The classic Dungeons and Dragons font here was modified and changed, and there was a stripe across the front, I think, and the images were shrunk down. So now these were not the first two printed, but what's important to me about these in particular, one is, I'm going to set this aside for now, is Return to Brookmere. When asked what was my introduction to Dungeons and Dragons, I always say it is this book, Return to Brookmere. I know it doesn't technically qualify, but to me it does, so you can kiss my whatever. But for a very young Scott, way back in the day, when his friend Kenny allowed him to borrow this book on the playground, this was the catalyst that led me to Dungeons and Dragons. Not because it was anything spectacular. In fact, I barely recall the story, but it opened up the possibility that not only was I a very rabid reader, even at an early age, but that reading was something that wasn't just for your imagination, but you can be interactive within it. I discovered this before I even discovered the classic Choose Your Own Adventure books, so that should tell you something. But one of the things, this doesn't even feel like it's been used much. Because I mean, if I was reading this, the saying would be bent over and folded and creased. But one of the things to point out about these particular books was the artwork in here. If I'm not mistaken, this was illustrated by Timothy Truman, which I think most of the other ones were illustrated by Jim Holloway. I will follow up with that in the other ones, but the artwork in this one was different. I mean, just look at this. Just this is not, the type of artwork you would see in a Choose Your Own Adventure book. Just right off the bat, you see this beast. This is, not your standard monster that you would read in a kid's book, back in the day. But it also kind of gave you, it evoked, this imagery, these horrid creatures that just weren't even your standard, orcs or monsters. These just seem to be different. I believe this was a elf too, which made sense because the original elves in D&D weren't these tall, beautiful, blonde-haired creatures that you see in Tolkien, but more short and more. They were part of nature, but they were kind of more fairy-like. They were shorter humans, just slightly taller than a dwarf, but not as tall as humans were. And I don't think they really show that as much in the current artwork as they did back in the day. But so essentially, like a Choose Your Own Adventure book, you would start at a particular point in the beginning, and depending on your choice, you would go to particular pages in the book as you try to make your way through the adventure, hopefully getting through to the end. But for the most part, you would eventually come to an ending point. Go back to the beginning and choose again, which nobody did, because you kept that finger in the one page where you left off, and if you read it, you started all over again. Or you started back from that point, you didn't start over again. And anyone who says that they did are pretty much lying. So these, I'm not entirely sure if these were over in the United Kingdom. More over there was more of the fighting fantasy books, which were different than these because those utilized a die mechanic within the books themselves. So the roll of your dice determined where you would go within the story, rather than just picking, A, B, or C, a multiple choice question. But Dungeons and Dragons followed up with something like that later on, as did a lot of other books. But the thing that always got me with this particular one, that kept me going back to it, was, as mentioned, just the artwork. Just, the elf here, crawling out of whatever this muck and mire, probably a sewer, up this slimy, wall, a rat jumping for safety and this particular creature turns and gazes at him. This looks like a kobold. This is not a little tiny, dragon beastie. This is a horrid monster that you needed to be afraid of. These weren't just cannon fodder. At least within these books. I mean, every monster was something to be afraid of, because you never know if you were going to go to the correct page. And something like this orc here, which obviously dispatched someone, or maybe he dispatched whatever this was here, was going to kill, your main protagonist. And, and even here, we've got this possibly is an orc child, or a kobold child that is within these group of monsters. And so this artwork just ignited my imagination to the point where I started asking questions. Like, for a while I thought Dungeons and Dragons was just about these. And then, after borrowing this for oh, God knows how long, probably longer than I should have. Eventually came to ask him if there was more books. He said no, but there's a bigger game than just reading the books. And if you're interested, come on over and I'll show you what it's all about. And the rest is history. So yeah, I mean, what is this thing? And imagine, a young elementary school child reading these books and just lighting up your imagination. I remember that. That was one of my favorite images, the images of the hero. Bashing the back of a bugbear, probably? And a were-rat. So these featured many different types of monsters from the Dungeons and Dragons bestiary. Not just, your standard ones, but even if they were, they all were different. They all look different. A giant weasel, probably a gelatinous cube, and sitting around a table with looks to be other elves, dwarves. This is an elf with a beard and a mustache, very dwarven features, but these definitely look more like, they've got the elven ears. So, and an ogre probably. I'm not going to go through and look up what all these are. Old school kobolds or orcs, and on to the other one. So there were an original 4. This was not the first one. The first one I'll open up here in just a sec. But, the other book here is Mountain of Mirrors. And same thing, we have an elf hero who seems to be needing to, travel into this mountainous areas where it looks like we have a frost giant and a white dragon. This is an ogre. And I'm just going to kind of flip through these kind of quick so I can show the other ones. But as you can see, the artwork is slightly different. This is, obviously Jim Holloway. His stylings were different than, what was it again? Timothy Truman. Not familiar with anything else he did, but I think this was the only book that he illustrated for these Endless Quest books. But as we continue on, just wonderful. This was probably my second favorite next to Return to Brickmere, as far as time passing and going back to and reintroducing myself to the book. I think I might have been kind of particular towards elven heroes when I was younger. I couldn't tell you. I'm old. And I've put down a lot of rum over my life, so that might cloud it a bit. And of course, with any of these old things, one of the things that are always fun to see are the old advertisements. So we've got the basic set here. We got the old dungeon game. And then likewise, the listing of the other books. Published in 1982, and this was the second printing. So it still had the classic style, but these wasn't the first run. But at least this was the one I remember, having growing up. And we'll just open up the other two real quick here. Bring out that camping knife. And I can hear some people cringing every time I use this thing. But it's what I have here, so... Next, the Pillars of Pentagon. Now, someone might correct me, but I believe this was actually the first. No, it wasn't. It was the other one I'm going to open. This was the third one. I think it went Dungeon of Dread, which I'll open in a second. Mountain of Mirrors. Oh, there's my dog. Pillars of Pentagon and Return to Brookmere. But let's just look. Pillars of Pentagon, Mountain of Mirrors. It's going to be in whatever order. Not that important. They might have all come out at the same time. But this was a different one than the rest because you were pretty much solo with these two here. Pillars of Pentagon, I believe you had control of not just... Sorry. There's my dog. I believe there was you were part of a group. Yes, you were part of a party. At least you met up with him later in the adventure, even though you might have been a single protagonist. And I think this what the conceit was is you were trying to get Pentagon back into power. He might have been a it's been so long I'll have to reread these, but yeah, different style of artwork. Bowie, sorry, an image that I remember. This was so good. In fact, I think this was one of your companions that either changed or died. Something happened to one of your companions that caused her to either die or turn into this skeletal format, some sort of cursed treasure maybe. But once again, different artwork. This one was illustrated by Harry J. Quinn. And there was actually a part two, Pillars of Pentagon, which the part two of this was, Dragons of Rainbow something. Anyways, not that important. And then last we have, we're not going to show off my address there. Even though most of the people watching probably already have it or know where I live, so. All right, so last we have the Dungeon of Dread, which, yes, this was definitely the first one. And this one had a duo. Yep, that's right. I believe it was a human warrior and a halfling rogue or thief. This one was likewise illustrated by Jim Holloway, the one who illustrated Mountain of Mirrors. And yes, in this book you play the part of a human and so on and so forth, but you eventually either meet up or accompanied by a halfling. And, this was definitely in 1982 illustration, as it looks like you are the guitarist for, oh boy, I am drawing a blank. Sorry, it's been a long day. Anyways, gotta love that. So, very similar. We have, large bugs, a drunken baboon, which, if I'm not mistaken, there was something very similar to this in the fighting fantasy books, where you would come across a drunken monstrosity such as this. In order to proceed, you had to, fulfill a particular question or quest or something. Giant bullfrog, more bugs, another bullfrog. So I don't remember this one being was a big fan. I mean, other than the fact that there's the iconic picture of the water weird here, it just didn't grab me as much as the other ones did. This was always kind of seemed a little, I don't know, seemed a little boring. It just, we've got hyenas, slime or an avalanche of slime. It just didn't have the variety of monsters, and nothing against Jim Holloway. It just he's obviously given or illustrates whatever is provided to him, and we have a gargoyle here. So, and then eventually I do blink dogs, and eventually I think you make it to the evil wizard at the end. Yep. There's the iconic picture of him being bitten by your halfling companion. And so I mean, even though this has an iconic cover, I think this has been recycled for mini adventures and whatnot. But I believe this is probably the one most people remember the most, just due to the iconic cover. But as far as if I had to rate them, I would say it would definitely be Return to Brookmere, Mountain of Mirrors, Pillars of Pentagon, and least favorite being the Dungeon of Dread. So there you go. this is what I picked up. I am going to go ahead and read these and see if I can remember or figure out what they were as I go into them, or I'm just going to be entering these new simply because I have no clue how these things went. But I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a nice little escape. May introduce some ideas. It may not, but for the most part, it's just something for as a little break. Even though it's not literature, but something to enjoy, and of course something to put on the shelf, and also have let my children read them. They may get a kick out of them. I know they all game with me and they enjoy this kind of stuff. So passing the torch on. So anyways, there we go. These are the books that were inside. Dungeons and Dragons, Endless Quest books, Pick a Path to Adventure, Return to Brookmere, Mountain of Mirrors, Pillars of Pentagon, and Dungeon of Dread. Thank you for watching. This has been another completely unprofessional unboxing. My name is Scott, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.